tell them
Eiran Harris, Lea Roback, August 4th, 86.
Here.
Let us hope this machine, it's only no, if you don't hurt.
Now that's good.
All right. These are that I never asked because came to me after. Simply things is, when you were in Germany, was Bertolt there as well?
Busy writing here, beautiful poetry. He was a player of the plays. He was a great man. He suffers like so many others.
He apparently, as girlfriend, were you one of his girls? No?
No, but I wasn't. He was interested in, I was Canadian, come to Germany. Why? Him, first of all, another country, and I could learn German, and the people there, things were tough. Hitler was coming in. Leave it. It was very hard. You know, we're going away to England as quickly as we went to France, but also had tough time. Anti-Semites, anti-everything themselves. They were in to do there. Thought I was, because I spoke French, and I didn't change. They said, oh, well, she's eine Französe. I just didn't tell them I wasn't. I wish. Big business, eh?
Were you,
at the building, yes.
How were you?
I was, for granted. Sie ist eine Kanadierin. They didn't think I was eine Jüdin, and I didn't tell them. I didn't wear our Magen David, so I didn't say yay and I didn't say nay. And I was able to live there very comfortably for a while. But then the Hakenkreuz became more and more popular, and the young people, if they wanted jobs, they had to be in the Hitlerjugend, and then they had the Hitler Mädchen and Hitler Frauen, and the women wore the uniform. The women and the young girls, they marched and they carried on. They learned to shoot and everything.
What do they expect of you?
Well, I was Kanadierin. So, had I said, ich bin Kanadierin, aber ich bin auch Jüdin, that would have get the hell out fast. So I just said, ich bin Kanadierin. Ach so, wie schön. And they wanted to know all about Canada and about how the French and the English got along. And I said, very well. Each one has a right to their schools and language. And I said, there's intermarriage as well. Ach so. And they didn't ask me about Juden, and I didn't.
But they didn't expect something from you, let us say, to further their cause. He was a Canadian who could possibly be helpful.
No, I didn't mix in their politics. I told them I came here to study the language, the history. I said, that's why I came here. Ach, wie schön. Wirklich, Fräulein Roback. And it was. So I came here not as a French Canadian, English Canadian, Jewish. I came here as a Canadian. Sie ist Kanadierin. And had I said I was Jewish, then, of course, if I had said, ich bin eine Kanadierin, aber ich bin eine Jüdin, no, it would have been grässlich. So I just said, ich bin Kanadierin, and ça marche.
They didn't try to convert you?
No.
The students?
No. They would talk about their politics. We discussed that. But I told them, das ist nicht für mich. Ich bin nicht interessiert. But I used to get the Rote Fahne. I got that regularly. And I used to go to the communist meetings, because at that time I was red.
Didn't they?
No, sie ist eine Kanadierin, sie möchte etwas wissen. So that's how things went. And my brother, it was the same thing. He was a Mediziner aus der Berliner Universität, my oldest brother Harry. That's where he got his degree. But for him, it got tough. A man, ein Ausländer. Warum bist du hier? So my brother said he wanted to be ein Mediziner, ein deutscher Mediziner. So. Und dann, my brother said, und dann fahre ich nach Hause. Ach so. Und das Geld? My brother said, I paid every 6 months for 3.5 years, almost 3.5 years. He said, das ist Kanadier Geld. Habe ich hier in Deutschland gelassen. So, danke. Heil Hitler.
Who was asking the questions?
A person who belonged, he had the brassard, you know,
Yeah.
Hakenkreuz,
Yeah.
Red and white on a red band.
And black. The
And
black. Yeah.
oh yes, to make that stand out.
What I was about to say what right he had to ask, but
Oh,
that's a
they
silly
did.
question. No, but who was he to ask?
Well, anyone could stop you on the street. It was that way. He didn't have any right from the government. He said, he came to my room, Passaporte bitte. So your passport was your living card, because I wasn't German. So I had to carry my passport all the time. Oh yes, that was my living card. And so, bitte, Passporten, they'd come in on the buses, they'd come in their uniforms. Bitte, the conductor, bitte the Fahrschein, your ticket or your transfer. Then he would be done with us. The next one, the uniform, come into the bus, Heil Hitler. No, this way. And people would answer, Heil. And it was terrible. But I, being an Ausländerin, and I used to say, I don't speak German very well. They'd say, warum denn nicht? I said, ein bisschen hard. Schwer? I'd say, sehr gut. Oh boy, it was tough, because I was into political, and I used to go to readings and literature groups. Oh, I really used my time in Berlin. It was really the theater. And mind you, the theater had those, like Elizabeth Bergner, most of them. Pardon?
How long were you able to get away with it?
Well, until I left, finally, the leader of the communist movement said to me, Leechen, ich glaube, es ist viel besser, dass du nach Hause fahrst. I said, warum denn? He said, Leechen, es gibt Krawall hier. Krawall means trouble. And he said, du bist eine Kanadierin. Even he didn't know I was Jewish. Oh no. And so he didn't ask me. So I told him I'm Canadian, showed you couldn't go anywhere without your passport or your card. And foreigners, your passport was precious. Many of the German people used to try to get passports from others, and they take the other man or the other woman's picture and put their own in. And that's how they were able to get out. Many of the Jews did that. Yeah.
Who was the gentleman who warned you to get out?
Well, he was a member of the party.
Was he anyone who was known in the world?
No, he was just an ordinary leader in Berlin, my group, the student group.
Do you remember his name?
Oh, boy.
Oh, that famous he was.
Yeah. Rudolph was the first name, but I don't remember his other name. I know it started with a K.
Well, if he wasn't world famous...
No, he wasn't world famous. He was well known in Berlin.
Ah,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you remember what was happening to cause him to warn you? I mean,
Oh, yes. Oh, my dear. Many of the people who were students from France, from England, from Switzerland, they were told by their professors, sortez le plus vite possible parce que l'Allemagne, il y aura des ennuis. And we used to meet, and many of them, they beat it out as quickly as they could.
why do they take it so seriously? I mean, students don't
Because-
take things like that seriously.
Oh, yes. Politically, things in Berlin, in München, in Stuttgart. Stuttgart were strong festings of the German Nazi groups. München in Munich, strong. And in near Bonn, there was a small town. Bonn was a beautiful place, but also suffered. So Jews, whom I had, many of my pupils were learning English because they were going to get out. There was this Dr. Lebeck, Jewish German, very fine people, well educated, and Werner was their son. And he was learning English because they were going to send him to England. If you had friends in England, Jewish people, you were lucky because you could ship your kids out, and you could go too if you had the money. But if you had money only for your son, you got him out, they would go to Sweden. It was cheaper. The older people, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and there was that little town, Basel, in Switzerland. It wasn't a town, it was like a province. It was Basle, but the S was silent, Basel, not Basel, Basel, yeah.
But again, to me, students would laugh if somebody told them, hey, you're in danger, get out.
Not just if they were Nazi veranlagt, they stayed.
No, I'm talking about the outsider.
Oh, no, when the prof said, raus, so schnell wie möglich, we were told there's going to be trouble for foreigners, because they said if you don't go on your own, they'll push you out. Because in their program, the Nazi program, Juden und Ausländer, Juden und, unless the Ausländer would carry on, respect the Nazi, and contribute pinky, then it was fine. But most of the, first of all, the Jews, they left in droves, and boats, by planes were not very frequent at that time in the early 30s, but they would go by boat, transfer on trains, and get the boat to take them to Dover. Many, many, many of them shipped their money. They had friends in England, managed to get their money out of the country, and anyone that they could trust who was going out on their own, they would take a bundle and they would bank it in a bank from England, and then they would follow. It was really unbelievable what happened there. If you were a Jew, first, the kicking out, money, they'd take their money, they'd take their properties. And the Jews had good businesses there, like Wertheim. The Wertheim people had chain stores in different parts of Germany. The parents who set up the business, they got out. And then they started shipping out the sons first, and then the women. Oh, it was really unbelievable. A population of learned people, when you think of all the scientists and the historians and all that, could allow that. To this day, I wonder, how was it possible? It just shows you fear. They were promised, you will get this and that and the other, and if you don't do as we expect you to do, then you'll be shipped out. And many of them, they just couldn't think that you could leave all the years of work, your business, your properties, many of them in real estate. Oh, they were building. That's when they started building the high-rise, 10 stories, big deal. But it was at that time. And to think all of that, and many of them were Jews. The Jews really, at first some of them, they said, der kommt, der bleibt vielleicht 3 Monate, 6 Monate, then they came weg. But that wasn't it. And then when the kick was in the backside, they left. They didn't care about anything, just left everything there to save their skin. You know, even to this day, when I think of it, how could that have happened? Brilliant people, heads of scientists and everything. People were afraid. They didn't speak up. And you know, it can happen here too. It can happen in any country where there are mixed nationalities. All they need, look at here with Arcan. That is a very good example. He was building according to Hitler's program. He had the black uniforms, you know, and I used to say to my French friend, mais mon Dieu, comment pouvez-vous encourager un homme comme lui? Oui, mais Léa, tu peux pas comprendre. Il est là pour nous, il va nous aider. J'ai dit, il va vous envoyer au diable. C'est pas ça qui va vous aider. And what happened in Germany could happen here. Horrible when I think of it. Even the books written by wonderful writers, many of them were Jews, brilliant. They had book burnings. Can you imagine these cultured people, book burnings, piling up the books written by Jewish authors? Many of them had a mother who was Jewish, but the father was Catholic or Protestant. Doesn't matter. Burn the books.
You survived in Germany because you were teaching English?
Well, I survived because I was teaching English, and many of them who wanted to get away, and they paid me well. Oh, yes. They said, don't worry, give us all the homework. And they'd have those tourne-disc, you know.
Oh, the records?
Yes, yes. And they would, what do you call that? They would speak in that, records, speaking records. And they would put them on so they would get the accent.
Oh, that was the linguaphone.
Yes, linguaphone.
Yeah.
And so we used that. I used that with them. And we turned the Jewish people, they had to get out. Many of them couldn't get to England. They went to Sweden. And Sweden was so receptive, you know. They really loved, and they stayed there. And many of my non-Jewish pupils, there was one family in particular, they got out. They said, we can't live with a madman running a country. And off they went. They went to Sweden. They lived there, made a good life. Children went to university, learned Swedish. And they went to Sweden, they went to Norway, Denmark. Some went to Finland. Now that's a tough language.
Oh, yeah.
And when they went there, if they spoke German, there are Finns who spoke German, but their language was impossible. But they got to Finland. Some even went to the Soviet Union, but they could only stay 3 months or 4 months, not more than 6 months. That was tough there for them. And they didn't want to be in Russia. No, they said, we don't want to be with those people. They're bears, they're ignorant. Well, they weren't all ignorant. We've got some wonderful Russian musicians, composers, writers.
Did your Jewish students know you were Jewish?
No, they didn't. They took it for granted I was Canadian.
That's it.
That's it. Never, and these people, they were Jews, never went to synagogue and that kind of stuff. No, they were of Jewish parentage, and the actresses were mostly Jewish men and women. Didn't play in Yiddish. They didn't know the language, but they were of Jewish parents. Ja, wir sind Juden, aber die Sprache können wir nicht sprechen. So they spoke German. They felt German first. The German Jew felt German first, and then whatever he was. You know?
Well, that's why that whole business came as a shock to them.
That's right. That's right.
What I can't understand is how they didn't spot you going to all these communist readings and meetings and whatever.
Well, they used to laugh, you know. That's the Americans. They're curious. They go to different countries. They poke here and they poke there. And I didn't change their opinion. So it was no such thing as Canadian, Americana. You came from North America, Americana. Yeah, no, that was it. But when I told them, people I was more intimate with, my students, for example, I told them, ich bin Kanadierin in Amerika, aber ich bin nicht Amerikanerin, ich bin Kanadierin. And they wanted to know, well, what's the difference? I said, big difference. Our governments are different. And they were learning and I was learning. Yeah. But then I stayed on till the very end. And I lived with this Frau Dubke Hepner. I never had an apartment. I never had that money. I had a room. And she was very nice, partially blind, partially sighted, really. Very little vision. Glasses were no good for her. And she told me when I said I'm going back to America, Fräulein Roback, es dauert nicht lange. I said, Frau Dubke-Hepner, es wird dauern viele Jahre und ich muss nach Hause fahren. Fräulein Roback, Fräulein Roback. They were very kind to me. They never knew I was Jewish because I taught English.
Right.
And I taught French. So I didn't teach Yiddish. The Jews didn't speak Yiddish there. When the Russians, some of the Russians who came into Berlin, they would try to speak Yiddish, Jewish Russian.
Yeah.
They would try to speak Yiddish. And the Germans would say, Die Sprache kann ich nicht sprechen. I said, well, it's like the German. And the German would say, Was? Ach, Mensch, Sie sind toll, verrückt, was? Yiddish ist nicht wie das deutsche Sprache. Bingo.
Why were you teaching French?
Some of them wanted to go to France.
Oh, so you were a means of escape for most of them.
Those Jewish people, and they paid me well. They paid me in valuta, like $5 for 3/4 of an hour, but I'd give them an hour, $5. But then they wanted 4 times 5 lessons. That would be 20, they'd give me 25. And they put their minds to learning. And there was one engineer and his wife. They were not Jewish, but they couldn't stand that Hitlerism and all that Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler. They were getting out. They were going not to Norway, they were going to Helsinki, Finland. And they were lovely people. Oh, they paid me so well. And they learned. They would study and study. And they did well. I didn't know Norwegian, but they said, with English, we go anywhere. Norwegians, Swedes, Danish people, they speak English. And they did.
How many lessons did it take to teach somebody?
Well, you had to count 6 months.
How many lessons a week?
Oh, a week about 3, 4.
Oh.
6 months to really handle it well. Some of them, they weren't able to wait 6 months. They didn't have the pinky, and I couldn't do any charity work because I had to pay my rent, I had to eat. So they, for example, would say, look, all I want to be able to order a meal, I want to, if I want to rent a room or a house, buy a shirt or a collar. In those days they wore the collars. So these are the things I want to learn. And he would practice them. And then they had those little records.
Right.
And they would practice. They were terrible, those records. Used to give me a headache. But they kept them. They wanted to learn to get the hell out. And many of them are not Jews. But they couldn't stand this. We want freedom. So they would get away. Some even came to America. Yeah, but then after everything was cleared, they went back to Berlin. Yeah.
After the war?
After the war, yeah. They felt my family is buried there. I used to say to them, well, what does it matter? They're buried, they're dead, they're covered by earth. Fräulein Roback, es ist nicht so einfach. So I said, they're right, I suppose. When Marlene came out and spoke, Marlene mit the Beta, Marlene Dietrich, she came out and spoke, and she got out. She went to France, had work there, plenty. Then she came to America. My, she was a wonderful person. Oh, her singing, what a stage presence.
Did you know her as well?
No, no. But I used to go to all her plays. She was a legitimate actress. And then she started making films. She used to sing, and she started out in vaudeville.
In German vaudeville?
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Oh.
You had singers who would come out with their canes, walk up and down the stage, men, and Marlene with her hat and the cane, and everything she had was to be seen by the public from the head down to her toes. A great, oh, what an actress. And a head. She was very capable. She understood politics. Oh, she was nobody's fool. Yeah.
What in your upbringing drove you to labor union activities?
Well, it wasn't in my family. My family was liberal. They felt there's room for all kinds of people. En wat wil je zeggen? Ze door allerlei mensen. Jeder darf haben Arbeit mit Geld, kann leben. Und ze da genug Räume in ganz städtlich und man darf machen Platz für andere. And it was true. We learned that you're not only here alone. You've got to give a hand. Man darf immer sein frei zu helfen.
So, what directed you to the labor movement?
Well, to the labor movement, they had no unions in here in they had them in the States, but we didn't have our unions yet. And the Americans would come, they'd send in smart Alecs who didn't know their ass from their elbow, and they didn't care. They came here, we're going to organize this thing in 3 months, bang, bang, bang. Signed cards, and that's it. And many of those little factories there, those in the Jacobs building, you should excuse me, with rats running around. Horrible, horrible. We used to go through the back stairs, and when the girls would go to the washroom in the back, we'd give them each one folder, one paper that we had put out, and say, put it in the toilet. The girls go, they'll find it. Oh, I don't want. T'as pas besoin d'avoir peur. On est là, on va te protéger. And we did. There was a need for a union. There was a need for a union. The bosses paid under the table there. If the girl was nice and had a nice little tussie, she'd get extra. She'd do things for the boss. But if she was there as a worker, they paid, they told her, c'est 6 piastres par semaine. And then it went up to, when they heard that there was a union, on va donner 7 piastres par semaine. Well, we were asking 11. And they sent this Rose Posada. She was a wonderful organizer, a Ukrainian Jewess, but she always said she was Spanish because at that time Jews not so kosher. So she'd say Posada. Her name was, I don't know, Pruschnitz or something. Posada, no? And she told me, And then there was Mr. Shane. This is given a Hebreman.
You knew that she was Ukrainian and Jewish?
Oh, yes, she told me. We got along very well because I helped out. I was in the factory. I was working until I'd get thrown out. Then I'd go to another factory. And Rose Posada said, we're going to organize. And I knew about unions. I said, it's about time. She says, will you help us? I said, sure I will. I did. And finally, I got thrown out of the factory because they didn't want an organizer on the line. And so I told Posada, she said, you'll work with me. She didn't know any French. And we had a lovely person in the office, Lorette. She was the darling. She helped us to organize. And she was a person with good instincts. She didn't know about unions, but she said, vous allez les organiser, puis les patrons vont leur donner de meilleures payes. I said, bien oui, sans ça, on va faire la grève. That's correct.
Which office was Lorette in?
Lorette was in the union office because she spoke English and Mr. Shane didn't speak French. He only spoke, he was an American, he didn't need French. They sent union organizers from the States.
Shane was an American?
Sure. He was Dubinsky's right-hand man.
He stayed here for the rest of his life, didn't he?
Sure, he made a wonderful living here. Was given schlecht. He was like this with the bosses. I got wise to that guy. Oh, yes. And so we decided, and when Posada came, he didn't like Posada because she would tell him, get out of my way. She knew how to organize. But she also got soft, you know. It was one of those easy unions. You gotta be friends with the bosses too, Lea. Look, you can't always be at them. I said, if a worker is not getting his or her pay as the union contract says, we're going to fight. So he says, what will you get? I said, I'm not getting anything. Don't bother about me. But the contract says, he contracts Montreal. His wife used to go to the factory, get clothes for herself, and she'd say, you'll give me wholesale, eh? He said, better than wholesale. Take it home as a present. Because then he had them in his hand. You see, it wasn't a union that was for only the workers.
And yet the ILGWU has a good reputation.
Yes, because there were some people in the outfit that really did good work on the QT. We had some of the French women there who were really heart and soul in helping those girls take up grievances. And we have, on a l'union maintenant, we have the union now. You have a right to talk. You were short in your pay, or the boss was not giving you the right amount. They worked piecework, so much for so many pieces, and they weren't. They said, oh, a little French girl, what does she know? That's why they needed the union, the little French girls. They had no defense, and that's why a union must always remember it's not the New York office or the head office of the union that is going to give orders. We take orders from the workers. I have a grievance, and it hasn't been looked after. Well, it's got to be looked after. And if the boss will not deal with the person who's in charge of the union, then Mr. Shane, and he had to take a position because he'd get his ass kicked.
By whom?
By the workers. We had told them in the union, the union is there to protect you. And the union is Mr. Shane and all of us who work in the union office. Our salaries, you pay for them by your dues. We told them point blank, so they wissen. Oui, mais il n'aimera pas ça. I said, vous n'avez pas besoin de son amour. Il est là pour voir que vos griefs sont vus et puis corrigés. Oui, mais Léa, je vais perdre ma job. Tu ne perdras pas ta job. Some did lose their jobs, but it was our work to get them placed in a non-union shop, and where they would tell us, we'd say, laisse faire, dis-nous, puis on viendra organiser la boutique. And that's how we organized uptown.
What do you call uptown?
Up here, the uptown, downtown was where the factories were.
Yeah.
Down
The mayor.
Mayor and the Jacobs Building on St. Catherine Street.
Right.
That's downtown. Uptown was up around Fairmount. There were factories up around there. Small factories.
On St. Lawrence.
On St. Lawrence.
Right.
Near those streets. There was one on St. Lawrence near Laurier. Then there was another factory on St. Viator, near on Bernard, next to St. Viator. There were some of those bedroom factories. Oh, terrible, terrible.
What do you call bedroom factories?
A private house. They brought machines in, and they got it, and bang, 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 umpteen hours a day at night to make a few dollars. Well, we stopped that. Yeah, hard work. Couldn't get them all, but we got many of them. So that if the workers have to go and work in those places, the union has got to organize those places so they get the decent wages. But we perdre my job, ne t'en fais pas. The man will close the factory. I said, there are other factories. That's our job. People were afraid. The parents would say, oh, l'Union, c'est communiste, c'est communiste. It's not communist. I didn't tell them I belonged to the communist movement. I said, moi j'ai travaillé à l'usine. Elle dit, oui, je le sais. Bon, ben tu diras à ta mère. Au moment, ne me croira pas. I said, je vais aller lui parler. And I went to one place, I'll never forget it. The other places, they were nice, polite, but they were afraid. Ma fille va perdre sa job. But I went to a place, and the lady came to the door, and I said, je voudrais vous parler. Miranda me dit qu'elle a des ennuis à la maison, vous voulez pas qu'elle soit dans l'union. So her husband said, qui est-ce que c'est long là-bas? She said, tu sais, Alphonse, c'est une femme de l'Union. Qu'est-ce qu'elle vient faire ici, donc? Elle vient parler à propos que sa fille devrait rentrer dans l'Union. He said to her, loud enough for me to hear, moi, je suis son père, je vais m'occuper de ma fille, qu'elle s'occupe de ses affaires. Bon, ferme la porte. She closed the door on me. But the little girl, she finally decided. She knew that she had to belong to the union. We wanted a closed shop. And a closed shop, and everybody. You couldn't walk or work there unless you had a union card. The bosses didn't like the closed shops, but if they wanted workers, they had to accept it. So it was really quite something, quite something.
Let it. I think there's only about another couple of feet to the end of this, and we'll just turn it around.
Yeah.
What was the advantage of belonging to the communist movement?
Well, for me, I felt their program was interesting. It was a program to help people and help the unions. Most of the unions wouldn't have a thing to do with the communist movement because they said, we can't work with them. I didn't tell them, and I didn't wear a big sign, I am a red, I'm a communist. But social, it was such a damn shame. The socialists and the communists never got along. And yet, what the socialists wanted, the communists wanted, but the socialists apparently would take their time, say, well, can't go ahead and bang, bang, bang. And the communists wanted, what the hell, let's go at them, bang, bang, bang. Well, it didn't suit everybody. And finally, I felt that after many years, things were not working okay. Fred Rose, who had been the leader, most of the time he was in jail. They'd arrest him, he had a month in Donnerstein. And then he went away. He had to leave the country. They put him out. So the leadership was from Toronto, English. And here was a Fred. Fred learned, his French was not 100%, but Fred was able to give a speech in French, and he was able to help with the organization in French. It was not 100%, but they understood him. So it was difficult, but we managed. And then we had this wonderful Dr. Bethune. We'd send our workers, who could afford a doctor in those years? And Dr. Bethune was a man who said, I'm a wealthy man, I don't need money. And he went, and his door was always open. Women would come with their children. Dr. Bethune to me was a very, very special person.
Did he treat the poor mostly?
He had very wealthy patients too, but he never refused. If we brought him a patient, we said, she's got 2 children, they're very sick, and they can't get into the children's memorial unless there's a doctor that recommends. So he said, I'll get over there. I won't be able to do it today, but I'll do it next week. In the meantime, tell their doctor now, the man who's there, or the student doctor, to get in touch with me. Tell me about that, and I'll help him, but I'll be there, and we'll look after him. Never took 5 cents. And many is the time that he brought food over.
To whom?
To the people. We would send him, for example, poor French Canadians, and he would come and he'd say, what do you have to eat? Because he said that child is hungry. He said, pas grand-chose. He spoke French like une vache espagnole avec un accent portugais. His French was awful, but enough to be understood. So he said, but she said, elle a rien mangé, j'avais rien. What? Nothing? Where's your bread box? He'd go and look. Of course there was nothing. The man wasn't working. Their welfare had been spent already. They were off the list. So he said, we've got to do something. We've got to do something. And he would see to it, get that child in at the children's hospital up there in the mountain, he said. Child get food, child get fresh air, and the child will recover. And if there was nothing to be done, he would see the child get into a hospital, and the child would die there, and that was it. They needed bodies for experimentation.
So Bethune was a union doctor?
Oh, he was in favor of people having a right to a decent life. He never said a rich life. Everyone on this earth is entitled to a decent life, and that means food, clothing, and housing. And he would sign our petitions, and that helped.
But are we saying that every union girl who needed a doctor you sent to Bethune?
No, no. For example, many of the girls would be pregnant, would send her to Bethune, after all. But he would look after the children of some of our members who had little ones, and they had to go to hospital, but they were French, and the Notre Dame hospital wouldn't take them in, and the nuns, you had to pay them, you know, they worked for Le Bon Dieu, but Le Bon Dieu had to be paid. And so he said, never mind Le Bon Dieu, those children have to be well looked after and well fed. And he said, we'll see to it. He had wonderful lady friends, and they would love to please Bethune. So he'd say, look, go among your friends, get some money from them, or get some food, canned food, soups, and other things, and see to it, and bread, and butter, and if there's no butter, margarine, that's good too. And Bethune was a man, few words, action. Fantastic man. He died in China. He went because the Chinese needed him, and he went wherever he was needed. Yeah.
Well, he wasn't a pediatrician. What kind of a doctor was he?
He was a doctor, medical man, could look after adults, and the pediatrician, if he felt they really needed a pediatrician, he had a list of them, and that would go up to the children's hospital. There they would get fed, and he would see to it that when little Pierrette had to go to the children's hospital dans la montagne, the mother said, je pourrais jamais aller la voir. They lived down in the East End. So I said, ne vous en faites pas. Le docteur Bethune veillera que vous aurez quelqu'un ou des billets pour monter dans le tramway. Oh yes. And they would, or we would get together and get the tickets for her. And she would be able to go and visit her daughter. There was no taxi money, and of course she didn't have a car, but all she needed were 2 tickets, one to go and one to come back. So between ourselves, we'd get it.
One minute, wasn't there a union doctor altogether?
Oh, yeah, we had a union doctor too, but he couldn't go here, there, and yon, because the union doctor, he would make his tournée, his visit, once every month, check on the people, and quick check, you know, would say, you all right? Sure. Okay, you're all right. But if it was serious, Bethune would see to it, and that the kid went up to the Children's Memorial Hospital.
Why wouldn't the regular union doctor see to it?
No, that, my dear, the union doctor wasn't a children's doctor. He wasn't a pediatrician. Whereas Bethune, he was known, I mean. Bethune's name, Bethune would phone the Children's Memorial, I want 3 beds for the ages of the children, and we're going to send them up. They said, we're not ready yet. You be ready, that's one thing. He was firm and stern. When he said, we're coming up at such and such a time, and be ready, you certainly had to listen to Dr. Bethune, because he wasn't a biveman. C'était le Docteur Bethune.
You mean the Union doctor just looked after cuts and bruises, and Bethune looked after the serious?
Well, you see, and he was, and if he didn't have the time, or if he had to go to a convention or to a meeting in the States, he made sure that he left someone in his place to attend to the patients that made rounds. Oh, he was, Bethune to me was a great man. We lost a great man when we lost him. He gave his life. You know, when you think of it, there was a man, he was stern, didn't want any blue, couldn't stand liars and people who tried to schmooze. That kind of stuff he wouldn't accept. But if you came and told him, Dr. Bethune, there's a little girl, she's not well, you can't feed her properly. Oh, what's the matter with you? Bring her here. And he'd look at her and he'd play with her. He bought, I don't know how many dolls he bought for the children at the Children's Memorial.
No, when you say bring her here, where was
his office?
Where was his office?
His office was on, you know where Phillips Square is?
Yeah.
And you go in, there's a plumber on that side, and then there's a door that goes up. He was upstairs from that plumbing and Phillips Square. Not far across the street was Henry Morgan's.
He was close, he was on the east side of Phillips Square?
No, he was behind the square. You know there was a little street?
There are a couple of little streets.
Yeah, well there was one there where there was a kitchen. It had the name. Well, there's Phillips Square,
yeah,
and then there's a little street that goes in from Phillips Square, and it had this sort of a kitchen or whatever it was.
You mean a soup kitchen?
Yeah. Oh, yes. And you could send people there, and Bethune lived across from that, upstairs. He had a beautiful apartment with 4 different windows in different areas with different views. Oh, my.
Oh, so this was an apartment and an office?
An office, yeah. Both. Beautiful. And he always had time for the children. A very devoted man. Never wanted to, when people would say, thank you very much, tut. Go on home now and feed that child. And he saw to it that there was food brought there. A man unheard of. And he gave his life. When the Chinese, when the Spaniards.
He was there too.
He was there. Oh my, what he did for those Spanish people. Even the nuns, they used to cross themselves when they'd see him, because c'est un protestant. Il fait pas de religion. Mais c'est un homme de cœur. Le bon Dieu aura soin de lui, c'est certain. And when I'd tell him that, or my other companion would tell him, he'd say, I don't have to worry. They're praying for me. They have a special God, and that's fine. Oh, really. He was special. Yeah.
Your brother, you had what, 2 brothers?
I had more. I had 4 brothers. I had Harry
Yeah.
before me. He was the first. And then there was Joseph and Michael and Leo. So there was 4 boys, Harry, Joseph, Michael, Leo was the youngest, and 5 girls, 9.
How many of the brothers followed you into the labor movement?
No, there was Michael. He became a communist. He wasn't a well person. He had cancer of the cheek, and they took the whole cheek off. But he used to dress it in that skin-colored thing, and if you didn't look too closely, you'd imagine it was his cheek. But he died very young. And Leo, he was the last one. He married a non-Jewish woman, Jeanette, a lovely person.
Wasn't he involved in labor?
Leo, sure.
Yeah.
He followed in the footsteps. He was very active in the trade union movement.
As what?
Well, first of all, he went to organize. He helped to organize. Madeleine Parent was organizing the textile. And Leo went. He spoke French very well. So he went to give a hand there. He did volunteer work at first, and he did very well, so they put him on the payroll. And he helped Madeleine and Ken Rowley. Yeah.
In which union, or various unions?
This was the American Textile Union for the textile. He helped to organize the textile workers.
So he was a union organizer.
Yeah.
all his life?
Well, most of the time. Well, first of all, he finished his university. He had his master's. And then he went in with Madeleine and Ken, and they helped to organize. And then Leo, after, about 12, 13 years, he got married to Jeanette, and then they went to live away from Montreal. They went down to, they went to British Columbia, and there, naturally, he helped to organize. And Jeanette, she did also, she used to help him. She used to fold the leaflets that were made. She didn't know about unions before. She was an English, Anglo-Saxon, comfortable, came from a very good home, from the eastern townships. Had their own home with a big garden and 2 or 3 other lots. And at first they didn't like the idea of her marrying a Jew. But they found out that he was a Jew, but a good person, an honest person, and that's what he wanted. So he said, well, he's honest. All right, Jeanette, we'll accept him. And Mama said, of course, she's my daughter. So finally, both sides, everything went hunky-dory.
Did he return to Montreal?
Oh, Leo, yes. Oh, yes, he came there. He died in Montreal.
But, so when he returned, he continued his union
activities?
Yes,
union activity with Madeleine. He was working in Valleyfield at that time. Then he came, and they were stationed in Montreal because there were some cotton factories in St. Henry. So, yes, the Dominion Textile had branches all over the place. And when Madeleine was, and Ken Rowley were organizing in a small town in British Columbia, Leo ran their Montreal office and the organization. Yeah, he was a real good union man. Yeah.
You told me at least once that after a while you became disillusioned with the party's behavior. Tell me that into here, so I'll know what it was all about.
Well, it wasn't. You see, I guess I put the party on a pedestal. And one should never, never put people on pedestals because they can fall and they can hurt themselves and hurt others. So I was really disillusioned because many of the things that were done from Toronto, which we had to do here, were not to my liking. Well, look, I wasn't in charge here. I was in charge of my shop I organized. But I had to toe the line. And of course, it wasn't exactly what I wanted. I was disillusioned. I felt that wasn't it, to give in. But you have to give in sometime. And that I found hard to get into my noodle. So I was sort of upset, and I told Fred. So Fred said to me, Fred was in prison, and then he went, they kicked him out of Canada, and he went back to Poland. That's where he came from. So we had the gang in Toronto. There was Tim, there was Sam Carr. I didn't like some of their ways of doing things. So I said, I think I'll take a rest. So I never spoke against the movement, but I didn't pay my dues. I told them, and I gave them my card. I said, I don't. Well, keep it. I said, no. I'm not, and I don't need that. Take it. So they took it, but they said, remember, we're going to hold it for you. I said, you can hold it for me. Go argue. But I never went back, although I did not talk against the movement, and I was very grateful for what I learned in the movement, which I would never have learned otherwise. Some of the things I threw in the basket, but the things I held on to, and I felt I got something out of it. I did.
Can you elaborate on what you got out of it?
I got out of it that there is a way to help people as a group. We can, as a group, work and help others in groups, not one by one by one. You'd have to live 1,000 years. I learned that. So, and I learned another thing very important. I'm not a miracle maker. And I had to admit to myself, Lea Roback, you're not so I. Take it easy. Work with people, see what you can do, but you can't bring it all in a month or 6 months. I learned that, and that was a very important lesson for me. And that the movement was not like little Jesus. There were some people who were in there because it was a good place for them. They had esteem from groups, they had money. Many of them were just sitting on their bloody asses. But they got, every week they got paid because they were waiting for the workers. You couldn't just go in and say, we're going to organize you. Hey, take it easy. You had to be invited to come to organize. That was a hard lesson. And I learned it, and it was very important. So when they came, and if you felt that it was not going to be something that will be done in 1, 2, 3, you have to tell them. It's a tough shop, tough boss, not going to be easy. It might take us 2 years. Yes, there was one shop uptown here, which we call uptown, in the North End. They were Syrians. They were tough. They had a big dress factory, cotton dresses, and they even sent a woman to come and work in the union and see how things are done. But we caught her with her pants down. That Stickeldreck, I'll never forget her. You know, she came in and she said she was ready to work for nothing. That immediately was not kosher. So I said, well, how are you going to live? Je vais m'arranger. J'ai dit, comment? Oh, je ne suis pas à la confesse ici. J'ai dit, non, vous n'êtes pas à la confesse, mais vous devez me donner une réponse. Je n'ai rien à vous dire. So I said, ben moi non plus, j'ai rien à vous dire. Puis sortez. But she did get some of the workers because Shane was a Jew. On est mené par this girl who left the ILGWU and went with that Stickel Gemäusacht. She said, on est mené dans nos shops par des Juifs, puis notre union aussi c'est mené par des Juifs. So one of the girls said, Lea Roback est pas une Juive, elle est polonaise. And the girl said, t'es folle? Je sais pas qu'elle est juive. Elle dit, elle parle français comme nous autres. Elle dit, ça n'a rien à faire, c'est une juive comme Shane puis toute la maudite gang. So anyway, she came and she said, vous êtes juive? J'ai dit, oui, pourquoi? Et ça change les choses. J'ai dit, toi, t'es catholique, je te laisse faire ta religion. Moi, je suis juive, je fais pas grand-chose dans ma religion, mais je suis juive. Oh, dit Madame Roback, j'ai rien contre les juifs. Elle dit, ben non. Elle dit, vous savez, par exemple, les juifs ont crucifié notre Seigneur. J'ai dit, oui, c'était un juif, lui aussi, hein, c'est votre Seigneur. Elle dit, t'es pas juif, il était catholique. J'ai dit, t'es pas catholique, ma fille. Alors, elle a dit, je vais demander à maman. Chouette. Maman, est-ce que le Christ, notre Seigneur, était un juif? Sa mère a dit, c'était un hébreu. Ben, elle dit, Madame Roback de l'Union a dit que c'était un juif. Oh, ben, elle dit, un hébreu, ça parle pas comme les juifs, pas si vite, mais ils ont leur langue. Puis elle dit, le Seigneur, lui, parlait pas le juif, il parlait l'hébreu. Elle a dit, mais maman, alors, quoi, nous, on est catholiques? Elle dit, oui, on est catholiques. Il y a des catholiques, il y a des protestants, il y a des juifs, il y a des Chinois qui ont leur religion, il y a les Japonais. Ah, mais moi, elle dit, je pensais que tout le monde était catholique. Sa mère dit, mais voyons donc, Yvonne, mais qu'est-ce qui te prend? So that was settled. Oh, oilem goilem.
What was your reaction to the 20th Congress?
The
CPSU 20th Congress.
Well, it wasn't to my liking. But I went. There were things there I didn't approve of at all. Things change, and I felt we weren't quick enough. And that led to, she felt that it's time to say goodbye. We thank you for what we have. And Madeleine was such a darling person. She had belonged to the party at one time, but she got out much before I did. And Ken Rowley, he too got out of it fast. So, but I say, we learned something. There was a certain discipline. We learned that. We learned to stand up and be counted, stand up and tell people they have rights. We really opened up certain areas where the people would say, you know, can't talk because I lose my job. That was number one. Or if the landlord don't want any people who doesn't believe and acts the way they should, les communistes n'en veulent pas. Landlords would say that, and in schools, no communist children in the convent. Les religieuses n'en veulent pas. That's it. So it was not easy, but as I say, learnt. We learned many things that we were able to use, many things that were not useful.
You know, the 20th Congress, where Khrushchev revealed all, which created quite a hubbub.
Oh, yes.
I was wondering what effect it had on
it
you.
opened our eyes. If Khrushchev came out in public and said it, you know, many of those dyed-in-the-wool communists would say, oh, he's no good, he's no good. He said what he saw, and that's what it was. So when I went to the Soviet Union in 1934, there were lots of things there that I'd ask questions, and they'd say, well, when you're here a while, you'll get used to this. I'd say, what kind of nonsense is that? And I had a boyfriend there who was a Montreal chap who went there with his brother and Volovsky. His father had the Jewish Daily Eagle. They went to the Soviet Union at the time when it was a great honor to go and help the Vychnoi, to help build the Soviet Union. Women went and they became bricklayers. They'd carry a brick up, you know, put a bit of schmirach, and with a little prayer, they started building houses which didn't last. But it was a period of learning, and as one got stronger and older, realized that was not, what I had believed in was not being done anymore. So I said, Lea, believe in yourself. And I got that in my noodle. And I decided that's what I was going to do. So I didn't belong to any political party. And I read, learned, traveled, and I built up my own self as well as I could, and decided no political party has the whole thing to offer which I would like. So leave it alone, but use your vote. That's one thing. We women fought to get the right to vote as women. I never missed my vote, never. And when I hurt my leg, I told them, come and pick me up. And it was just up the street. When I lived on Linton, just up the street. And so they picked me up and they brought me there. And I put my cross where I thought was the right place. Then they took me back home.
How can you be sure that the things you have believed in since you saw the light are for real?
No, nothing is for real. That's one thing I learned, and I learned it well. Things change. Things must change. Just as the baby is born, grows and grows, becomes an adult. So we, at the age of 6, we know that much. And at the age of 14,
A little more.
Very little more. And when you're a real adult, still very little. So much more to be learned. So can't live that long. But as I say, as long as I have glasses, I can read. And as long as I have legs, I can walk, I can go to a good film, I can go to a good lecture at the art gallery. I go, I have a ticket, a bus ticket, one to go and one to come back. May not have a cent in my pocket, but that doesn't matter. I went to the art gallery and I saw the new show, and it's beautiful.
Which one?
The one there of it was a conglomeration of the first of the past 25 years of this Frenchman, I forget his name now, not Martel, great French artist, and his works were on show at our art gallery here in Montreal.
You're talking about the Montreal Museum of Fine Art?
Yeah. And I went. My nephew didn't want me to go alone. I said, if I wait for the others, on soup tard. I said, I've got my bus ticket. Auntie Lea, you take a taxi. I said, yeah, pish. I always get a seat on the bus. If it's crowded, I have a cane, white hair. What more do I need? So I get a seat, Madame, c'est vous. And I said, je suis pas fatiguée. C'est vous, Madame. Merci beaucoup. And I take my cane and I sit. Was felt mir. So nice.
Do you also go to the Sadie Bronfman Gallery occasionally?
Oh, yes, I do. They send me a notice. They're very nice. They're lovely there. They have wonderful shows, you know. Sadie Bronfman was a very fine lady. She was my president when I was at the YWHA, and she really did things for us. We had money. I would say to her, we should be sewing. Some girls here want to learn to sew. We should have a machine here. So why do you always ask me? I said, you know, Mrs. Bronfman, you've been so kind, and you're fortunate. You have the money. And I said, we'll put a notice on the sewing machine, donated by our president, Madame Sadie Bronfman. Oh, she said, I don't need that, never. But she would give. She was very, very generous. And she'd say, it has my name, the Sadie Bronfman. Why? And she said, I'll do what I can. When she used to say, I'll do what I can, I said, no, don't have to worry about Madame Bronfman. But we had a collection of clothes, new clothes we wanted for some of our girls who'd come to the Y. They didn't have decent clothes. They were looking for jobs. But you can't go looking like Raggedy Ann. So one fine day, I said to Madame Bronfman, will you come into my office? I want to talk with you, and I don't want to talk here. So she came. I had a shtickle office there, sat down. Now she said, you want money, I guess. I said, money? Possibly. But I'm going to tell you what we need is clothing, new clothes. For some of these women here, there are 6 girls want to go to work. But she says, you can't go to look for a job looking like Raggedy Ann. So she said, didn't I know you'd want money? I said, I want money, or I want nice clothes to fit these girls. They're 12 and 14-year-old sizes. She said, I'll see what I can do. I'm not promising. When she'd say, and I'm not promising, okay. Then I'd phone this man who was a great friend of Madame Sadie Bronfman, very generous man, and he loved to be in Sadie Bronfman's good graces. I'd phone him, and I'd tell him, you know, Madame Bronfman is going to give us a nice bunch of money to get clothes for those girls so they can go and look like people for a job. Oh, what is she going to give you? I said, I didn't say the amount. She said she'd look after it. I'd say, well, if I give you a check for $500, will that do? I said, it will help, thank you. Took out his checkbook, and he said, that check won't bounce. I said, he better not. So we managed bit by bit, but I will say, Madame Bronfman, of course she was multi-millionaire, but she was, if I would tell her this is necessary, that is necessary. We had a piano that was as old as I am, and this key didn't work and that key didn't work. I said, you know, we need a piano. She says, you know what that costs? I said, I know, but we need a piano here. You say we give piano lessons? They can't play the piano here. It's a broken down piece of wood. Take it out. Well, I'll see what I can do. So I'd say to my helper, Ruthie Ruttenberg, I'd say, we're going to get a piano. She'd say, you've got nerve. So I don't have nerve. I'm polite with her. And she says, okay. So I say, why shouldn't I say okay? And that's how we got
these girls who came looking for work, were they, what, immigrant girls?
Well, most of them were immigrant people from the past. They were in Quebec now, Canada, for about 10, 12 years. But whether they had taken out citizenship, I didn't bother about, not then. But then, when it got, about 3 or 4 years later, got necessary, and I told them, they won't send me back. I said, they won't send you back. We'll have the man come here. It's an organization, and Madame Bronfman will look after that. She phoned him, and she said, will you come? I'll be there too. And of course, yes, Madame Bronfman, yes, Madame Bronfman. And that's how these people were able to get jobs, have decent clothes. Some went in to work at Poyanner's on the main street selling yard goods. Some went into a factory to work as an operator on a machine. We were able to play, not all of them, but a good many. We found jobs for them, and others did. They wouldn't go as servants. No. They said, we're slaves. Absolute, and it's true. The madame would say, oh, you'll have to, they'd sleep in. The madame would say, you'll have to stay here and be up until we come back. They'd come back at midnight, and she was falling off her feet. That was a real slavery. Our Yiddish ladies, if you please.
This was at their homes.
Yes.
In their rich, wealthy homes?
That was it. They had a stickle room there. What do you mean? She never had it so good. Never had it so good. You know, some of our Yachnalas, c'était pas du monde.
It was what, so widely known that to work as what would you call them? Servants?
Those people?
Yeah.
They were people with no trades.
Right.
So if you have no trade, you can always set a table. You can always help dress a child. So until, that was one thing that was well done. When they knew the ways, the wherefores of this country now, they would either leave, or we would say to them, you can get a job in a factory. Better. You don't You're not on duty 24 hours a day with Madame so-and-so. In a factory, you go in, and I said, there's going to be unions in most of them. You go in for 7:30 at that time, then it became 8 o'clock, 8 until 5. And I said, after that, you don't owe them anything. You're home, wherever you are, in your room or in your house with your family, until next morning. And you go in, and you're independent. That's it. And it helped. It helped them. Yeah? You know, some people have no defense. What can I do? Can I do? You know, so you give them a hand, and then you say, now you're on your own. That's it. It's tough.
Were these maids, that was the word,
yeah.
Were these maids so badly treated?
Well, it wasn't, they weren't whipped, they weren't slapped, but they were supposed to have a certain amount of hours work. They lived in.
Right.
And when they live in, after the number of hours she's given to Madame, you lock your door and you don't answer it. But Madame would say, come and help